What happens when Russia's most advanced fighter bomber, flown by elite pilots who thought they owned the skies over Donbas, suddenly encounters a Ukrainian F-16? October 2024 provided an answer that sent shockwaves through Russian Air Force Command. And it wasn't the answer Moscow wanted to hear. Picture this: a Russian Su-34 fullback, a $50 million twin-engine fighter bomber representing the pinnacle of Russian military aviation, is cruising over eastern Ukraine. The crew feels confident. They've flown dozens, maybe hundreds of missions in this war. They know their aircraft is one of the most capable in the Russian inventory. They understand that Ukrainian air defenses are dangerous, but they've trained for that. What they haven't trained for is what's about to happen next. Somewhere in that same airspace, a Ukrainian pilot sits in the cockpit of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, the first Western fighter jet to enter Ukrainian service. Years of training, months of anticipation, and decades of Ukrainian dreams about joining NATO and flying Western aircraft have led to this moment. The pilot's radar picks up the Su-34. A decision crystallizes in seconds: engage. The Su-34, Russia's billion-dollar investment in air superiority. Let's talk about what makes the Su-34 so formidable, because understanding what Ukraine shot down makes this victory even more remarkable. Did you know the Su-34 was designed specifically to replace the legendary Su-24, learning from decades of Soviet and Russian combat experience? This isn't some Cold War relic hastily pressed back into service. We're talking about an aircraft that entered service in 2014, incorporating the latest Russian military aviation technology. The Su-34 represents Sukhoi's answer to the question, how do you create the perfect strike aircraft? The result is a beast of a plane. Twin Saturn AL-31F turbofan engines provide massive thrust. Advanced avionics, including the Leninets B004 radar system, give the crew situational awareness previous generations of Russian pilots could only dream about. The aircraft can carry a staggering weapons payload, up to 8 tons of precision-guided munitions, bombs, rockets, and air-to-air missiles. But here's what makes the Su-34 truly unique. Unlike most fighter bombers where pilots sit in tandem, one behind the other, the Su-34's crew sits side by side. The cockpit is spacious enough that pilots can stand up during long missions. There's even a galley and a toilet. Russian media loved to tout these features, portraying the Su-34 as a flying office that could conduct extended operations in comfort. Russia invested billions in the Su-34 program, producing over 140 aircraft and positioning them as the backbone of its tactical strike capability. These weren't planes Russia could afford to lose. Each Su-34 lost meant not just the aircraft itself, but the highly trained 2-person crew and the immediate reduction in Russia's ability to conduct precision strikes. Throughout the war, Su-34S had become Russia's workhorse for strikes against Ukrainian positions, infrastructure, and military installations. Flying from bases in Russia and occupied territories, these aircraft launched thousands of sorties, dropping glide bombs, firing missiles, and providing close air support to Russian ground forces. So what could possibly threaten such a capable aircraft flown by experienced crews? The F-16, a legend, finally arrives in Ukrainian colors. The journey of F-16s to Ukraine is a story of determination and transformation. For years, Ukrainian pilots flew aging MiG-29S and Su-27S while waiting as Western nations debated sending modern jets. The F-16, a legendary multi-role fighter used by over 25 countries since 1978, brought more than just firepower. It brought a complete ecosystem of advanced radar, NATO weapons, and decades of proven upgrades. When approval finally came in 2023, it wasn't just about receiving planes. It meant retraining pilots, overhauling maintenance systems, and rebuilding logistics, all while fighting a war. Transitioning to NATO standards under combat conditions is something most air forces would take years to achieve. Yet Ukrainian pilots, fully aware of the stakes, trained tirelessly, mastering the jet that would finally let them challenge Russian aircraft on equal ground. By October 2024, that preparation paid off. Their moment to strike had come. The hunt, how air combat actually happens. Hollywood loves to show dogfights as close, twisting battles between jets, but real air combat is far more technical and often over before the pilots even see each other. In the October 2024 encounter, the Ukrainian F-16 pilot was likely guided by radar or AWACS support, detecting the Russian Su-34 first. Information dominance decides modern battles. Whoever spots the other first usually wins. While the Su-34 focused on its strike mission, its radar warning receiver suddenly lit up. It was being tracked by something new. The F-16 pilot locked on, launched an AIM-120 AMRAAM, and the Su-34's crew tried evasive maneuvers and countermeasures. But the Su-34, built for ground attacks, wasn't agile enough. The missile's radar seeker stayed locked despite electronic jamming and flares. Seconds later, it found its mark. In modern warfare, victory isn't about acrobatics. It's about information, speed, and precision. The moment that changed Ukrainian aviation history. Can you imagine the radio call that went back to Ukrainian Air Command? Splash 1 Su-34. 3 words that represented a watershed moment in Ukrainian military aviation. For the first time since receiving Western fighters, Ukraine had scored an air-to-air kill with an F-16. But this wasn't just a first for Ukraine, it represented validation of everything the F-16 program promised. All the training, all the resources, all the political capital spent convincing Western allies to provide these aircraft had just paid off in the most dramatic way possible. A Ukrainian pilot in a Western fighter had engaged and destroyed one of Russia's most capable strike aircraft. The propaganda value alone was incalculable. Russia had spent years claiming its air force was superior, its aircraft more advanced, its pilots better trained. Western analysts had worried openly about whether Ukrainian pilots could transition effectively to F-16s in the compressed time frame available. Skeptics had questioned whether providing F-16s would really change the air war. October 2024 answered all those questions with a fireball over Donbas. For Ukrainian pilots flying MiG-29S and Su-27S, the news must have been electrifying. Their comrades flying the new F-16s had proven what everyone hoped. Western fighters could compete effectively against Russian aircraft. The psychological boost to Ukrainian morale was matched only by the psychological blow to Russian confidence. The Russian response when superiority becomes myth. What does it do to military morale when your elite equipment starts falling from the sky? Russian Air Force Command faced some uncomfortable questions after October 2024. The Su-34 was supposed to be one of their premier strike platforms. These aircraft had been operating over Ukraine with relative freedom, protected by distance from front lines and extensive air defense networks. Now, Russian pilots had to operate knowing that Ukrainian F-16s were hunting them. The immediate tactical response was predictable. Russian aircraft began operating more cautiously. Strike missions that previously flew within Ukrainian airspace now relied more heavily on standoff weapons launched from Russian territory. Aircraft that did penetrate Ukrainian airspace did so with more extensive fighter escorts. Flight patterns became more unpredictable, but these adaptations came with operational costs. Standoff strikes are less accurate than direct attacks. Fighter escorts consume resources and limit the number of strike missions possible. More cautious operations mean reduced effectiveness across the board. Russian state media, of course, had a field day denying or minimizing the loss. Initial reports claimed the Su-34 was downed by ground-based air defenses, less embarrassing than admitting an air-to-air loss. Later stories suggested technical malfunctions. The propaganda machine worked overtime to avoid admitting that a Ukrainian F-16 had bested a Russian Su-34 in combat. But Russian pilots knew the truth. They saw the intelligence reports. They attended the operational briefings. They understood that the air war had fundamentally changed. Ukrainian airspace was no longer permissive for Russian aircraft. The technical chess match. Why the F-16 won. Let's dive into the technical factors that likely contributed to Ukrainian victory, because this isn't just about who has the better aircraft. It's about how different capabilities interact in combat. The F-16 brings several key advantages to air-to-air combat. First, its radar and avionics systems, particularly if Ukraine received upgraded Block 50 by 52 variants, are more sophisticated than the Su-34 systems. Better situational awareness means knowing where threats are before they know where you are. In modern air combat, that split-second advantage is often decisive. Second, the F-16's radar cross-section, how visible it is to enemy radar, is smaller than the Su-34's. The Russian aircraft is massive. It has to be to carry its fuel and weapons load. That size makes it easier to detect and track. The F-16, while not a stealth aircraft, presents a smaller target to enemy sensors. Third, weapons integration matters enormously. If Ukrainian F-16s carried AIM-120 AMRAAMs, they possessed a fire-and-forget capability that allows the pilot to engage and then immediately maneuver defensively. The missile's active radar seeker guides it to the target without requiring continued radar illumination from the launch aircraft. That's a massive tactical advantage. Fourth, training matters. Ukrainian F-16 pilots received NATO standard training that emphasized air-to-air combat in addition to ground attack missions. Russian Su-34 crews primarily trained for strike operations. When a strike-optimized aircraft meets a multi-role fighter in air combat, the outcome is rarely favorable for the strike aircraft. What comes next? The new air war. So what does the future hold now that Ukrainian F-16s have proven themselves in air-to-air combat? Russian Air Force planners face an increasingly complex challenge. They can no longer assume Ukrainian airspace is permissive for strike aircraft. Every mission carries greater risk. Ukraine, meanwhile, gains confidence and operational experience with each F-16 sortie. More pilots complete training. More aircraft arrive. The institutional knowledge of operating Western fighters grows, and every Russian pilot knows that somewhere in Ukrainian airspace, F-16s are hunting. This creates a strategic dynamic that favors Ukraine. Russia has to operate more conservatively, reducing effectiveness. Ukraine can be more selective, choosing when and where to engage. The initiative in the air war, which Russia expected to dominate completely, becomes increasingly contested. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Ukraine's most significant air-to-air victories, smash that like button and subscribe for more content covering the tactics, technology, and human stories behind modern military operations. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on how F-16s are changing the air war over Ukraine.